Hey guys, happy Friday. I'm here today to talk to you guys about carbohydrates. Now, this is a pre-recorded lesson because I am absent for March 18th, but I wanted to be sure that I could still provide you with some nutrition information. So carbohydrates are one of my favorite topics because they're so misunderstood. They're totally demonized. And I'm here to tell you that there are good carbohydrates and they're necessary in our lives. But I will also talk to you guys today about the keto diet. So we'll talk about what foods contain carbs, why we need them, how we know if it's a carb. There's some pretty interesting facts that I've learned in my nutrition program about fiber, besides the fact that it makes you poop. And then, yeah, we'll get into the keto diet. I put this meme here because I know personally, I am not the type of person that likes to go without carbohydrates. Okay, you tell me you want me to cut carbs and buy a bike. This is my interpretation of it. Okay, little pizza cutter that looks like a bike. I thought it was cute. Okay, so what foods contain fiber? Well, or I'm sorry, carbohydrates. These also contain fiber. That's why I messed that up. We've got fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, nuts, seeds. All of these foods are going to contain carbohydrates. Some of the foods that you guys eat, most of the processed stuff like chips and crackers, candy, juice, soda, granola bars, all those things also contain carbohydrates. But a lot of the things that I just mentioned that are not pictured here, the ones that I see you guys eating, they don't contain fiber, and that's actually what becomes a little bit problematic. So we'll discuss that a little bit. Now, I know a lot of you are already tuning me out and you're like, dude, I'm not going to eat fruits and vegetables. I get it. I didn't want to either. But I will tell you that my students, when they see the kinds of foods that I eat, they're always like, oh my God, your recipes are fire. You got to post those. They always tell me, oh, I don't even like vegetables, but that looks so good. Oh my gosh, meal prep for me. I mean, if I had $1 for every time I've had comments like that in my class when I'm eating, I would be rich. I'd be super rich. So I'll stop for a second and say, look, I do have some of this information available to people. Oops. Okay, so I do have a website, lauraroynutrition.com, and I've just made these videos for families and friends. By the way, if you want more of the science on the stuff that I've talked about on these Zooms, you can find that stuff here under videos. These are some of the classes I do for adults, and I have a little bit more time. But if you're interested, especially my students that have been asking me about this, in some of my recipes, you can find them here. There's some videos on meal prep. And then I have a slide deck that has some of the foods that I typically meal prep. So if you want to check that out. All right. So as I said, I'm not going to go into too much science, but I have to talk a little bit about it. So this equation you guys have seen in your biology class, this is cellular respiration, and this is how we make energy. Notice that the first ingredient or our first reactant is glucose, which is a carbohydrate. I'm gonna hide my video so you guys can see my meme. So we strongly prefer to use glucose in our bodies to make our energy. So if you've ever known someone who's gone on a low carbohydrate diet, they might have felt pretty miserable, like this poor doggy. I feel like this when I go on a low carbohydrate diet too. So we really want to use glucose for energy. And if we don't have glucose available, our bodies have to work extra hard in order to make our energy. And that's why you might run into people who say, yeah, I feel really tired and lethargic and grumpy when I go on a low carb diet. It's very hard to sustain because that's not the way your body was meant to run. Okay. Now, even though we have pathways that can help us make energy other ways, this isn't what our bodies prefer. However, that being said, sometimes I come across people who really do like being on a low carb diet and they do feel better. Maybe because they were eating the wrong carbs to start, or maybe because they have differences in their genetics. So I mentioned before, you have to listen to your body. I can tell you in general what is good for most people, but you're going to have to determine what works best for you. And if you've ever heard of 23andMe, which is a service where you spit in a little cut thing and you send it in and they tell you all this information about your ancestry and all these different genetic traits, genetic diseases. We also can do that for nutrition. Okay, so we do we have tons of research on the genes that are related to how we metabolize different nutrients. So it's possible that you could have some different mutation that causes you to do better with different amounts of carbohydrates or different amounts of protein or different amounts of fat and so on. Now, do I think everyone should get one of these tests? Absolutely not. They're very expensive. They're not necessary. Maybe in some rare instances, I would recommend that I have a patient do this. But I was happening to take a class in nutrigenomics, so I wanted to see all these different genes and how they relate to nutrition just for my own knowledge. So, but just so you know that we do know that people are not all metabolizing things the same, and that's why not every diet works the same for every single person. Okay, so we prefer to use glucose. All right, let's talk about carbohydrates for a second. I'll move my video so you guys can see my little cartoon I put in here. So complex carbohydrates versus simple carbohydrates. So simple carbohydrates are typically going to be associated with the junk food. Also things like white bread, white pasta, white tortillas, all the white stuff, as well as fruit. Now, fruit's not bad for you. So fruit does contain simple carbohydrates, but it has something called fiber, which the other foods that I mentioned don't. So that's what redeems them. Okay. And it doesn't mean that having any sugar is bad. It's just, if we want it to be accompanied by fiber, which I'll talk about in a moment. Okay. Our complex carbohydrates, again, all of our whole grains. So like whole wheat bread, vegetables, nuts, beans, things like that. Those are going to be our complex carbohydrates. So think about complex carbohydrates as our good carbohydrates, and most simple carbohydrates are bad, not all. Okay, again, I don't want you to stop eating fruit because it contains carbs. There we go. That's the picture that's supposed to be there. So we have this thing called glycemic index, and it's just telling us how much it spikes our blood sugar. The problem with spiking your blood sugar a lot is then we have issues with insulin, and this can lead to diabetes. Also, if you're always spiking your insulin, you're not going to be in a position to be losing weight if that was your goal, okay? And that's not really the ideal situation for even building muscle, okay? So simple carbohydrates are going to be just one or two sugar molecules versus complex have lots of them. So it takes longer to break down these molecules because there's more bonds to break. Also, most complex carbohydrates are going to be accompanied by fiber. All right. So how do we get these simple carbohydrates? Well, simple carbohydrates could just be because we just add sugar to them, things that have sugar. But the other thing that happens is we refine our grains. So refined grains are a less healthy version of something that was really, really great. So the reason why we refine them is some people do prefer the taste of them as refined. So like white bread versus wheat bread, okay? White pasta versus whole wheat pasta. I can go on and on. So the brown versions kind of versus the white versions. The white version, what we've done is we've stripped a lot of the nutrients. So we actually lose a lot of the vitamins and we lose almost all of the fiber. Okay, 2/3 of the fiber is what is lost. So if you have the option between brown rice and white rice, choose brown rice, okay, over white rice. If you can get whole wheat pasta or whole wheat bread versus white pasta or white bread, that would be a better decision. Okay, even whole wheat tortillas. The other thing that this process does, it's not just for taste, but it does make things more shelf stable, okay, meaning they'll last longer. But if you can choose the whole grain version, choose that. Okay, so what's the big deal with fiber? Well, it actually can affect the hormones that control whether or not you feel hungry or if you feel full. They actually they have mechanisms within your cells that do that. And again, if you want to know more information about this stuff, I go a little tiny bit more into the science in my videos on my website. Okay, indirectly, it actually helps us stop storing fat by several different ways. All of them having to do with our microbiomes, the bacteria in our gut. The good bacteria in our gut love fiber. And then when they eat them, they produce these molecules that help this process right here. Okay. So I won't get into it too much, but I think that's a really good reason to eat fiber. Okay, again, not only does it increase or stop fat from being stored, it also can increase fat breakdown, again, through nurturing our microbiome. Okay, helps bowel movements. Most people already know that. I think most people think fiber, they think pooping, but that's a real legit concern for a lot of people. If you have issues with blood sugar, you have family members who have diabetes, then you have a genetic predisposition and you should be concerned about this. It can actually improve the blood sugar by slowing down the rate that the sugar is broken down. So that's why fruit is not an issue. It has fiber, but it's not going to spike your blood sugar because it has a mechanism to do that, both by slowing it from being broken down, and also sometimes it just traps it and carries it out. Same with cholesterol. It can improve your cholesterol levels through a few different mechanisms, but we know all the science behind this. We've seen it. All right, on to the good stuff. I know you want to know about keto. Okay, so the keto diet. So what this diet is where you have, oh, I got that virus. It's supposed to be less than 25 to 50 grams of carbohydrates per day. It takes several days for us to go into ketosis. It doesn't happen right away. And if you eat just a little bit too many carbs, you won't be in ketosis anymore. Okay, so it's really hard to manage. And unfortunately, we have this idea of dirty keto versus clean keto. So the actual scientifically studied keto looks more like this, where it's mostly fat, healthy fats, right? These like salmon and avocados, and you do eat vegetables and fruit, just a little bit less. And this is the way to go because you can have a lot of adverse effects by eating like this. But honestly, both of these diets will work. They'll get you into ketosis and people do lose weight, but this is not healthy overall. There's other issues that you can have from that, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Okay. Now, I actually recommend keto to very, very few people. I don't think that it's sustainable. So I just want to go out by saying that initially, that there are it definitely works. And it's definitely good for some populations. In fact, I prefer, if you wanted to even try this, that you'd come talk to me first and then talk to your doctor as well. All right. So what the heck is this? So we make these compounds called ketones when we cannot make our energy from carbohydrates. Okay. And they make a little bit less energy than glucose. Okay. So the idea is that if there's no glucose available, then we're trying to make our body instead use fats for energy. That is the main idea behind it. And the reason why we make these ketones is that we really, really, really need fuel for our brain. Our brain requires a lot of energy, and it really strongly prefers glucose. Okay, it's meant to metabolize over 99% glucose, but it can run on these ketones, which were made from fat, when the glucose is not available. So some of my, all right, the other thing I wanted to also add is that if you are trying to truly do a diet like this, you would have to be managing it with doing like blood pricks like a diabetic would. They do those for ketones. I just wanted to do a side note because a student did ask me the other day about the urine test strips for ketosis, because their doctor was telling them to do a keto diet. Those only actually work for like the first few days, and then they're not reliable for determining whether or not you're in ketosis. Okay, so here's my concern. The way most people do a keto diet is that dirty keto that I showed you, just eating lots and lots of meat, just concentrating on only foods that don't contain carbohydrates. And that can be really taxing on some of your organs, and especially if you have any kinds of issues with kidneys. So I know that I've had several students that have told me that they've had issues with like kidney stones and such. So that would be a concern. Now, if you were following the keto diet correctly, this wouldn't be so much of a concern. Something else that would be concerning to me is because most people don't do the keto diet where they include vegetables, and include fiber is that they are going to screw up their microbiome, because the good bacteria in there that control so many things in our body, this is like a whole nother organ. They eat fiber, and you might be depriving them of that if you do the dirty keto diet. But something that would apply to whether you're doing dirty keto or clean keto is that they've done these studies where we found that the size of their telomeres, which is the top of your chromosomes, which are normally telling of our age, are actually shorter if you've done long-term keto diets. Okay, so you're literally aging your cells when you do the keto diet. And the other thing I'll say is that diets don't work. And I know that's like so cliche, but here's the thing. If you're not learning how to eat in a way that's going to be permanent, then it's not going to be helpful. You won't be able to sustain it. And keto diets, I've done it before. It's hard to sustain. You definitely want to be eating the wallet sometimes. And what I find myself doing is when I've done keto is then all of a sudden when I stop, I just binge on carbs, which can sometimes be higher in just in calories in general. So a lot of people will do these diets and then they just gain more weight back. And that is why we say that it doesn't work. Finding a way to eat that you can sustain, that you could just a way of life is how you maintain your health. All right, I'll see you guys next time.